Hey, Scott from MyGrowthRings.com here once again is in my garage shop, and we are continuing on with the Shopsmith 18-inch Jigsaw. I do have a body double standing in for the Shopsmith Jigsaw. This is a Total Shop, which is a Taiwanese clone of the Shopsmith Jigsaw. The Shopsmith Jigsaw is better, no question about it. This is a fairly faithful copy of the Shopsmith Jigsaw, and the things that I want to show you today we can do with this jigsaw as well. So I promised I had a couple jigs, I promised you I had a couple tricks and techniques to show you in this video. And as I've thought about it, I think I need to break this down into 2 videos. So that makes it a three video series. Didn't mean to do that, but for reasons I will explain maybe in the midweek follow-up, depending upon if anybody has any questions, comments, or cheap shots about that position. I'll tell you more about it then. So let's talk about this saw and some things that make it unique. We've already talked about how it's different from a scroll saw, and how a scroll saw is powering the blade both downward as it normally would be cutting, as well as powering it when it goes back up. That allows it to use much thinner blades, and we can make sharper turns without the risk of the blade breaking. However, there are some neat things we can do with the jigsaw that we can't do with the scroll saw, and that really starts by removing some things. So we're going to begin by removing the blade. I'm going to move the camera in really close because there's something that can happen to you with this saw that might come as a surprise, and I can show you a simple solution to it. So to change the blade, first thing we do is we take the tension off of this tensioning device. It's going to come flying down, so you loosen the knob and guide that down easily. At that point, we can take our Shopsmith toolbox and we can loosen the screw that's holding that in place. We can, at this point, raise that up and lock it, and you can see it's now separated. Pop the table insert out, use the wrench to get the bottom chuck loose, and pull the blade out. Now, let me show you what can happen if you're not paying attention. So let's say I go to loosen that bolt down below, and I don't hold on to the blade for some reason. Uh-oh. Where did the blade go? Yeah, that's right. The blade had just gone down past the chuck down into the oil bath. So I remember this happening to me one time in a class. I had no idea what had happened. We don't want to just leave it there. Obviously, that can damage things. And it's not as complicated as you might think to get to it. But what I have to do is remove the chuck, and that's held in place with a 5/32 set screw. I can use my Shopsmith toolbox to do that. And then you need a magnet to retrieve it. So watch this. Loosen the set screw that holds the chuck onto that shaft, and we can lift that off. And now we need a rare earth magnet to get down in there. Let me see if we can do it. I got a stack of them here, which are doing what they do. They're being attractive to everything. Come on now. May need to extend this a little bit. There we go. And we got it out. And the chuck goes back on just as it came off. There's a little dimple in the shaft that the set screw will set into. And there we go. So I've mentioned several times that this is an 18-inch jigsaw, and that 18-inch is the distance from the blade to the arm in the back, which means you can cut to the middle of a 36-inch circle. But what if I want to cut something bigger? Am I out of luck? Well, no. I mean, with any bandsaw, jigsaw, scroll saw, I mean, you got to think about it. A lot of the things that we're cutting can just be off to one side, maybe supported with sawhorses or something. And I also mentioned that we've got the main table and extension table on the Shopsmith. So if we position the blade so it cuts from this direction, we've got tons and tons of support way over there. But that doesn't mean that this arm isn't going to be in the way sometimes. So one of the things we can do with this saw is we can take the arm off. So let's do that. There's a large bolt down here that if we loosen it, oh, and this one hasn't been loosened in a while. Goodness. With that loose, we can pull the arm completely off. So let's make sure everything is tight here. And now I'm going to give that a little bit of a wiggle, see if I can loosen it up. And wiggling and pulling. There we go. Look at that. So the whole upper arm can come off. Now look at all that capacity. But you might be asking yourself, don't I need that part? Well, that's another trick that we can do with the Shopsmith Jigsaw. That is, I can use saber saw blades. Some people call these Jigsaw. Typically, I call them saber saw because there is a difference between the kind of saw that typically uses this and a jigsaw that uses much finer blades. But these are Bosch blades. They work fantastic. And what we need here is about a 4-inch length or longer. And the way these work is they go right down inside of the jaw. And you've got to hold them because there's no real stop here. They can drop right on through if you're not paying attention. And locked in place, we now have an almost unlimited jigsaw capacity. So let's find something we can cut with this. All right, I got a piece of 3/4-inch plywood that we were playing around with the other day. That should serve us nicely. Here we go. Got quite a bit of movement there. Hold on a second. Let's try that installation of the blade again. Make sure I got it on a beefy enough segment and give it enough tension. Try that again. So I was putting a load of downward pressure, as you can see, because it does want to lift. A couple things about this. Saber saw blades like this come with teeth that are either cutting on the, let's just call it in this case, the downstroke, or cutting on the upstroke. All right, so this is a saber saw, and this one works by pushing the blade down and then pushing the blade forward and then pulling up. And it's that action, that orbital action, that does the cutting. And in fact, with many of these, you can adjust how much orbital action they get. The more of that orbital action, the more aggressive that they cut. This one is made by Works. I have a bunch of Works tools, garden tools, string trimmers, things like that. They use this 20-volt battery, and in some cases use 2 of the 20-volt batteries. And this one is kind of a neat little saw, but you can see as I pull the trigger here, how that's moving up and down. By the way, part of what makes this saw neat is I can press this button and rotate it, and I can use it as a reciprocating saw for pruning. Kind of cool, huh? Anyway, it is possible to use a blade that cuts on the downstroke, in which case with this saw you wouldn't want to have the reciprocal action on. And that's done so that if you have to cut from this side, I'm working on a countertop and I have no choice. And I don't want any tear out. I don't want the blade to be cutting from the bottom and lifting up as it cuts because that would cause splintering and tear out. I want that blade to do its cutting on the downstroke. So they have what's called a reverse tooth blade, where the teeth on the blade are designed to cut that way. Well, if you did that on this saw, it would be lifting your stock the whole time you're cutting. So just a standard, let's just call it an upcut blade, is what's designed for use on this particular function. Now with this setup, doing pierce cuts, where, for example, you draw two not even close to circular circles on a piece of wood, you drill a hole that's going to allow the blade to pass through, and I can then easily cut within that circle, within that piece of stock. Um, how big can the piece be that I'm cutting in the middle of? How big's your shop? So this would go something like this. Stop it. Try that again. You know, that just brought back a memory from using this saw in the academy, and that is that occasionally you'll get some lifting, and it's possible for that insert to pop out, and now you got a space in between, and eventually you feed the insert into the blade. You don't want to do that. So we used to take these and put a piece of masking tape across. We also did that for a kind of a zero clearance insert. If you put masking tape on both sides, right up to the edge of the blade, it would give you less tear out. Gosh, what memories. Anyway, that's how that's done. Now, one last thing that we can do with the saw that's pretty slick, and that is we can use it for cutting big circles. So to do this, we're going to take a piece of stock, we're going to find the center, and then we're going to mount that center, well, if it's a really big thing, over there on the main table of the Mark V. Let's do that real quick. So back in the early days of the Shopsmith Mark V, that's what the rip fence looked like. And one of the features of that was a hole in the top drilled 5/8 of an inch in diameter. And if you've seen it used at all, it's typically used for the hold down on the mortising machine. So just like on any drill press using a hollow chisel mortiser, you want to have a hold down that's in line with the spindle on your drill. Well, that's what this is. This, when it's locked onto the main table, is right in dead on alignment with the quill. One trick that we used to be able to do, the cup centers that came with the Mark V, were milled down on the end with straight 5/8 inch walls, if you will. I mean, it was basically a dowel that could fit here inside of the fence and be locked in place. Since we stopped doing some of these tricks, they've stopped machining the cup centers like that. So I can't do this here, but you may be able to do this if you have a 500 model. That's the one with this fence, the smaller tables. Check to see if your cup center, not your live center, some call it a dead center, see if that will fit inside of your fence. And you may be able to do this trick even easier than I can. So what I need to do is I need to create a pivot point. In the case of my jigsaw, it's where the point, the center of my stock is going to pivot as I make my cut. I could do this right on the main table. I could do this in the miter slot. I could do this in the table insert. I can do this on the fence. You know, the 510 fence has a T-slot channel on the top. The 520 has two of them. We could make a pivot point that mounts that way. But just for the sake of easiness, I'm going to go ahead and put a pivot point right on top of this auxiliary fence. And one of the advantages of mounting it with the T-nuts, like I would have this attached, is I can fine tune the position of that pivot point by moving it forward and back. So I don't even have to use the machine to mark the center right off the bat. I can align this after the fact. So let me just find a nail. I never use nails.
20 minutes later.
All right, so we're going to find our center on here, or as I've already admitted, we're going to guess. And I'm going to tap this brad down in there. It didn't need to be that long. Now I got to remember to avoid that if I make a dado here. And I need to sharpen that with a file so it's not a broad head. Got to find a file now.
2 hours later.
All right. Let's see what can happen. So from here, we're going to measure to the center of our stock. And we want to have a 4-foot circle. So we're going to measure 24 inches over to our pivot point. We'll lock that down. We want to make sure that this is roughly the same height as the jigsaw. Oop, you can't see any of that. Sorry about that. So we can lay a straight edge across here to make sure that this is not higher. If anything, it's equal to. Now, I'm going to find the center of this material by running a straight edge from corner to corner and marking the center. This is so not ideal, guys. All right, we have roughly the exact center. And then we're going to place that over our pivot point. If we've done this right, we've set this up right, we should have already gotten ourselves positioned right in line with the blade. So 24 inches away should be where that's falling. Now it's a matter of making sure that we are centered. So probably going to be a bit of a rough ride. It's going to be hard to hold it down, but I'm going to focus my attention right over here over top of the jigsaw table because that's where it needs to be held down firmly. The rest just needs to pivot and would be wise to go ahead and pound that in. Now here's where we're going to learn whether our pivot point is centered or not. If it's too far forward or too far back, we'll change the size of our circle that we're shooting for. And we'll know that if we've drawn a line, we can spot it pretty quickly. So the first one, maybe rather than being sacrificial, should have lines drawn in that circular pattern so we know. This one's just for fun. So here we go. So I don't know how that looks from your angle. It might look like my hands are getting close. I don't think they are, but I'm going to move you. But one thing I'm noticing here, we're almost an inch from the edge. So either, well, I did something wrong, but doesn't matter. We're going to go with it. I hope that my fence isn't loose. It's a little bit loose. I'm going to go ahead and break this off right here because I don't need that falling to the floor or getting caught over there under the table. Yep, yep, look at that. Let's go ahead and stop because that is implying that I'm nowhere near the center. So my center line began a quarter of an inch away from where my crosshairs are, but then it looks also like it's moved as I've cut because I didn't sharpen that very well. I had nothing to sharpen it with. All right, I think we get the point. Uh, all right, we're just going to stop it there. I need to I need to sharpen my pivot point, obviously. But one of the things that's going through the minds of some of you is, well, why didn't you just use the saber saw you had in your hand? Or, if I had this other tool, I would use that instead. The point is, if this is the tool you have, if this jigsaw is the only saw in your arsenal, it's far more versatile than you might be giving it credit for. And so, there's a tool on the market that's called the Blade Runner. It has been sold under the Works brand, the same company who made that saber saw that I have. It was also sold under the Rockwell brand. Both of those companies are owned by the same company. It's a very interesting saw that uses those Bosch blades mounted just like this. And if you look at their infomercials on YouTube, you'll see all the things they talk about, about how you're unlimited in width and so on. All that applies to this saw as well. Um, if that saw is of interest to you, by the way, the Blade Runner, there have been a couple versions, not just name plates, but versions. Look for the one that's variable speed. On the front, I think it's the left corner, you'll see a little circular um, dial for tuning in the variable speed. It's kind of a cool tool, but look, hey, if you have a Shopsmith jigsaw, you've already got a Blade Runner. In our next weekend's video, I'm going to show you the real trick, and I think it's the one that's going to make a lot of people that don't even own any Shopsmith tools want to buy this. So Shopsmith tool owners, I'm giving you a heads up. You got a 1 week's head start on Craigslist and eBay and wherever else you might want to pick up one of these saws, because the feature or function that this thing can do next is in high demand right now, thanks to Adam Savage and the YouTube channel ClickSpring. More on that next week. Any questions, comments, cheap shots, drop them down below. We'll answer them in the midweek follow-up video that I call Stumped Q&A. Huge shout out to my channel members. You now number over, what was it, 108, I think, which is fantabulous. And gosh, you guys are pretty darn awesome, but you knew that. All right, make it a great week.